Hello and welcome back to another video. So today I want to talk about a simple photography technique that I use all of the time that makes such a big difference to the way an image feels. And this technique can be used in all genres of photography, from say portraits right through to landscape. So lots to cover in the video. And this video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build your perfect website. So we're here at this amazing ancient woodland today. Massive woodland, in fact. It covers about 67 hectares. I've got about a 6-mile walk ahead of me, and I'm really hopeful that I can capture something truly amazing today. The leaves are just starting to turn, so we're getting into that autumnal feel, and I'm really hopeful that we can capture some shots today. So the topic I'd like to talk about today is separation, and how we can use separation in our photography to help guide the viewer or give our images a certain look or feel. Now, as always, you know, photography is subjective, isn't it? These are just the ways that I use separation in my photos. But when I look back at my photos, I think I use separation in one form or another in almost every shot. So I definitely think it's a worthwhile topic. Now I need to get over this log. Right. So I think one of the easiest ways to separate your subject from the rest of the scene is by using a shallow depth of field. So when I used to shoot a lot of portraits, I would open up my aperture, focus on the person's face, and the backdrop would naturally fall out of focus. And this is a great way to make your subject stand out. But this technique, you know, it can be used in all genres of photography. And I'm hoping that I can demonstrate this on this tiny little fungi that I found down here on this branch. So let's take a look. So I'm going to set up a shot just here. I've got this tiny little toadstool or fungi just here, and it's on this mossy log, and there's a few different bits and bobs in the background. It's quite cluttered, but I'm going to use a very shallow depth of field. I'm also going to put my macro tube on my telephoto lens so I can get really close in on the mushroom itself, and yeah, see if we can just isolate that from the background using that shallow depth of field. So if you're not familiar with a macro tube, this is a macro tube or an extension tube. This allows you to get closer to your subject and focus on it. So yeah, you can get that macro look, make your subject fill the frame. And these come in various different mounts. This is obviously a Fuji mount for my Fuji cameras, but you can get Nikon, Canon, all sorts. They cost about £10 and just allow you to convert any of your lenses into a macro lens. Yeah, save a ton of money. Don't necessarily need to buy a dedicated macro lens to enjoy macro photography. So I highly recommend picking one of these up. I'll try and leave this one linked in the description. But yeah, there's varying different brands on the market. Yeah, just do a Google search or whatever. Anyway, I'm really keen to see if we can make something work here. So the good thing about using a telephoto lens and a macro tube is you can get a bit further away from your subject. So say if you had your standard zoom lens on, you probably have to get really, really close, maybe an inch or two away from it. But if I zoom to about 200 mil, I can get about an arm's length away from my subject, which really helps. Because sometimes when you're in the woodland or an outdoor environment, you can't necessarily place your tripod where you need it to be. So yeah, that's a nice little tip. If you're thinking about giving macro photography a bit of a go. So I think I've got it framed up quite nicely. I'm just including a bit of the log in the foreground just to give it a sense of place and let the background really fall out of focus. So when we use a macro tube on a telephoto lens like this, the depth of field becomes wafer thin. We're talking less than probably 5mm or a quarter of an inch. So sometimes you might want to focus stack the image. So focusing on different parts of the fungi to get more of it in focus. Now I'm going to experiment with that. I don't know whether I'm going to use that or not, but I think it's a good idea to have those frames captured when you're in the field, and then you can make the decision when you get back home, because when depth of field is so shallow, sometimes it's very, very difficult to get a true idea of what the image is going to look like on the back of your LCD. So it's better to have those frames than not to have them. So I'll be focusing on a few different parts of the fungi itself, and I'm going to experiment with a few different compositions, because subtle movements left and right, up and down, can have such a big impact on the way things look as well. Anyway, let's capture this one, and I'll put it up for you, and then we'll go and see if we can find something else in this amazing location. shooting with a shallow depth of field is a very, very good way of getting good separation in your photos. Now, you don't necessarily need to have a fast lens like f2.8 to be able to get a shallow depth of field. There's a few different ways that we can get a shallow depth of field with a few different techniques, even if you're shooting at, say, f8, for example. Look at this. So I think one of the simplest tricks for getting a shallow depth of field is just getting closer to your subject. The closer you are, the shallower your depth of field becomes, even if you're shooting at something like f5.6 or f8. You know, moving in close will blur both the background and the foreground really nicely. So, for example, you know, you could focus on a flower or a rock in the foreground, and as you get closer to it, the mountains and the trees or whatever it is in the background will naturally blur, creating that separation between the subject and the rest of the scene. Another great way to get that dreamy background blur is by using a longer focal length, similar to what we did before. And lenses between, say, 50mm and 500mm will give you that very shallow depth of field, even at apertures like f5.6 or f8. So telephoto lenses can compress the scene, which can make your subject really stand out. And this works well when you want to highlight a specific subject, like a lone tree, for example. So zooming in can make that tree really pop while the background sort of fades away. And I find that in woodland photography, using a shallow depth of field can really help to add separation, especially when the conditions aren't ideal for capturing the wider scene like what we've got today. I think it's also worth mentioning, you know, that the further the background element is away from your subject point or point of focus, the more blurred it's going to become as well. So it's all to do with camera position and where the elements are positioned within the scene. Right, let's get cracking. Let's see if we can't find another photo. So this particular woodland I'm finding very difficult to shoot the wider scene. There's a ton of bramble in here, which makes things very, very difficult. And a lot of these settle oak trees are very, very spindly, which again isn't that pleasing because they're very vertical, quite thin. So when, you know, situations like this arise and it's difficult to shoot the wider scene, typically I'll look down at the floor and see if I can find some detailed shots. And I've noticed just through this little stretch here, there's some wonderful juniper haircap. And I think this is a great little plant, and it really does create a uniform base in which to make an image, and you can make some very minimalist, simplistic frames. So what I'm looking for is a fallen leaf, something that's orange. There's lots of oak and beech leaves lying around on the floor, and see if I can find a nice patch of this juniper to create a very minimalist frame. So before we get on to taking this minimalist shot down here, I'd just like to kindly thank the sponsor of this week's video, Squarespace. Now, I've been using Squarespace for many years to create my website, and I find the whole process just incredibly easy. They offer a wide selection of award-winning templates that can get you up and running quickly, and they even have AI design technology to help you create a more unique and personalised website. One of the things I love most is how simple it is to sell digital products like my ebook on landscape photography composition. Plus, pages get automatically optimised for search engines as well to ensure your products or your blog posts or galleries get as much visibility as possible. So be sure to check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Ian Worth to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Right, so another great way to create separation is by using space to isolate your subject from the surroundings. So giving your subject room to breathe really helps it to stand out. And there are a few ways I think that I try to achieve this anyway. Firstly, I try to create a uniform amount of space around the subject. And by doing this, it can make the subject more prominent within the frame. But I find it's also important, you know, to watch out for kind of anything that bridges that gap between the subject and the background. So for example, if I've got my camera here, for example, with plenty of space around it, if I've got something that's creeping across that negative space and bridging that gap between the space and my subject, it can make the composition feel a little bit awkward. I hope that makes sense. So, you know, I think paying attention to those little details can make a big difference. Another way I like to use space is by going for a very minimalist composition. In these cases, I feel the negative space, though, becomes just as important as the actual subject itself. And for me, I think, you know, the more minimalist the image is, the more uniform the background needs to be. And this is why those long exposure shots at the coast with simple, clean elements often work so well. I think it's that empty, even space that really helps the subject to sort of pop well, the rest of the image kind of holds that calmness within the frame. I absolutely love those type of images. So I've been working this stretch here. It's only about 4 meters long, but I've really been looking into the scene, looking for something minimalist, something to pop out. Shooting handheld. Now, whenever I'm looking for detailed shots like this, I forget about the tripod. I really concentrate on just framing it up handheld. If I've got enough light, obviously, and my shutter speed's high enough, I'll just take the shot as is. But when it's very, very dark, like what we've got here, I will get my composition fine-tuned, sorted out, know exactly where I'm going to take it, and then I'll set the composition up with the tripod and take the image. So that is what I'm going to do. And like I mentioned, I was looking for a leaf, wasn't I? Something that's got a very, very nice uniform background. So as you can see, this leaf here sits very, very nicely amongst the rest of this juniper hair cap, and that is going to be my frame. Now, I might make this either a square frame and put the leaf bang in the center of the image, or maybe go for a 4x5 and maybe sit it in the top left-hand third, because the stem of the leaf points down to the bottom right. So I think that might look nice. So we're all set up for the shot. I've got the tripod set up about, I'd say, 1.5 to 2 foot away from the actual leaf there, zoomed fully into 55mm on the 16-55 lens. I'm at 1 second, so you can tell how dark it is by that at f11. f11 because I need to get everything sharp, and at this focal length again, the depth of field becomes quite narrow, doesn't it? I'm focusing on the leaf because that's the most important part of the image. And yeah, we're going to take this shot now. ISO 125, f11, 1 second, manually focused, 2-second timer. Let's take it. And I quite like this shot. That leaf really stands out. Well, as you might be able to see, it's now foggy and it's actually the next day, so I ran out of light there after that last shot. Did try to find a few other compositions, but sadly couldn't find anything. And that woodland was particularly difficult, very, very cluttered. But you know, it was a new place, and it's always good to check out a new place. It's one that I can probably scratch off the list of places to revisit anyway. But I've come to a place this morning that I know very well. And well, I thought I did actually. It took me quite a while to find this particular location in the very dense fog that we've got this morning. But anyway, we're finally here after about 20 minutes of searching, and we're going to shoot a composition that I've shot before, but yeah, not this time of year. So this area is absolutely wonderful, as you probably can tell on the shot there that we've got framed up. We've got some wonderful mossy branches sweeping through this composition, and it really favours heavy atmospheric conditions. There's not a huge amount of leaf on the trees, but I think there's enough to help soften the canopy, which I think is going to be good. And I want to try and work on a few different compositions here as well, because there's lots of these branches reaching out through the scene. It really suits a wide angle shot. But this these conditions lead me on to something else that I really want to talk about, to do with separation and atmosphere. So I'm really trying to work fast this morning, because conditions like this don't stick around that often, and we're forecast heavy rain again in about, I don't know, maybe about an hour or so. So yeah, I'm trying to get this one in the bag and then work on a few other ones. But just want to talk you through my composition and how I've used this heavy fog to help sort of reduce the clutter in the background, because this scene is very, very chaotic. And you know, it's really about balancing the elements in the foreground together and just letting the atmosphere, the fog in the background, just recede and reduce that amount of clutter, reduce that chaotic environment we've got back there. And there is a patch of light as well, and the eye gets drawn towards that patch of light. So there's a natural pathway through the scene as the branches reach out to the top right-hand corner. So it's all about sort of flow and rhythm, as well as the atmosphere and the fog. So yeah, it's quite dark. F10. Trying to get everything as sharp as I can through the image. I'm taking 2 shots, one focus on the branch in the foreground, another taking on the main trunk, and that gives me enough depth of field then. And I don't worry too much about the depth of field or sharpness in the background. I'm just letting that fall away, because obviously we've got those atmospheric conditions anyway, so I think it helps soften the background as well. So yeah, 1.5 seconds, ISO 125. Let's take this shot now. So I think I'm quite happy with that image. But obviously another great way to gain separation in your photos is by using atmospheric conditions like fog or mist or haze. Well, I guess I say simple, it's not that simple, is it? We've got to have those conditions to start with, and that's really difficult to predict. But yeah, anyway, I think, this natural atmosphere, it can really help improve many shots because it can soften, distant details and help to reduce clutter, and that's especially useful in the woodland. For me, I find fog and mist especially helpful in these type of environments, especially when the scenes are very complex like this. And I think mist and haze work in similar ways, but I found they usually are kind of more subtle, if you like, and they can help to gently blur distant objects, which I think helps direct attention to what's closer to the camera. Now, when I'm at the coast or in the mountains where mist and haze is often quite common, I try to use these conditions to create depth within the frame. And this depth can also be accentuated with the use of a telephoto lens. So this shot here is a good example of how atmosphere and a long focal length can add layers to an image, which helps to add depth and separation to the shot. So before we get on to the next shot, I just thought I'd say, if you've got any questions or maybe some tips that might help other photographers out regarding separation and composition, please do let me know down in the comments section down below. It's always good to get a conversation started, and building that community down there is absolutely fantastic. I always enjoy looking at your comments and seeing what you guys have been up to as well. Anyway, I think we need to get on to the next point and see if we can get another shot amongst these amazing mossy branches. So the rain has started as predicted, about an hour. It's got it right for once. But anyway, I framed another shot up here, which I think looks really nice. There's a bit of autumnal colour in this one as well, with a dead branch hanging down from the left-hand side. A split oak tree, which is laying on the ground, which has got this wonderful curvature to it, which I think looks absolutely fantastic. And I definitely think there's a flow to this image and also light beyond it as well, which helps to add a sense of, I think, depth to the image. When we have light behind mist and fog, it really accentuates that amount of fog. So yeah, I think it works quite well, and it draws the eye through the scene, almost like a tunnel, if you like. Let's grab this one now. Focused on that dead branch, which is hanging down, which frames that little sort of tunnel quite nicely. Now, separation is obviously a great way of creating compelling photos, but as you know, there is so much more to talk about regarding photography composition. I could talk about it for days, I really could. And if you'd like to delve into this topic a little more, the video up there is highly recommended, and the link at the top here on the other side will take you to my ebook, which is all about landscape photography composition. There's over 120 pages in there, packed full of little tips and tricks that I use when I'm out taking my photos. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I do hope to see you all again next week. Take care.